not far away. Let's talk story. It's where my mama was born, it's where I come from, it's where my daddy fell in love not long ago.
Aloha, everyone. This is Larry Camp, and welcome to the Nobody Knows Your Story podcast, which just happens to come with a side of Hawaiiana. Nobody Knows Your Story is a podcast which I believe will impact each listener in a positive way. As you listen to the experiences that have transformed, shaped, and guided each guest, perhaps you'll better understand your own personal journey. Some will surprise, some will make you question, and some will inspire, but all will leave you in a better place for listening in. As for the Hawaiiana, well, that's just a big part of my life story. So I invite you to check in from time to time, or better still, add Nobody Knows Your Story to your list of favorite podcasts. You'll enjoy hearing the life experiences of people just like you.
It's the spirit of Hawaii that keeps you thinking of this lovely place. All the love, all the happiness, just the lover in your embrace. It's the spirit of Hawaii, the swaying palms on a sandy lagoon. Have all your grandeur dreams come true each time you wake. Waikiki has never looked so good, having been away so long. And now that you're here with me, I'll sing you my song. It's the spirit of Hawaii, even for a secret rendezvous, just as long as I'll be with you, my poina mauloa. Waikiki has never looked so good, having been away so long. And now that you're here with me, I'll sing you my song. It's the spirit of Hawaii, watching the sunset together now, just to hold you on the sand till the sun warms our love, and we look above and share the rainbow of
Aloha, friends, and welcome to another unique and interesting life story. Now, we just heard Spirit of Hawaii from Moanalua, and mid-podcast, well, we're going to hear Stick Figure with a favorite of mine, Edge of the Ocean. Now, if you're listening to Nobody Knows Your Story for the first time, or you're a subscriber, I want to ask that you support the musical artists that you hear on my podcast. If you heard my story way back in episode 5, then you know how much Hawaii and Polynesia mean to me. It's been a big part of my life. And if I can share the music of these artists and help them out a little bit, well, I want to do that. So yes, if you like the music, and I hope you do, please support them by making a purchase. Now, my guest today, Barry Adkins, reached out with, well, a powerful message that he's going to share as a part of his life story today. Barry, welcome to Nobody Knows Your Story.
Thanks for having me on, Larry.
Absolutely. And you have a video associated a little bit with the story that we're going to talk about today. And I watched that, and it is very impactful. So I knew I could say that because I know it's true. Let's start with you and where you grew up and What got you to where you are today?
So I'll give you the Reader's Digest version of it. How
Sure.
about that? So I grew up in Kalispell, Montana. It's up in the northwest corner of the state. I spent a couple of years in Alaska in seventh and eighth grade. But then the whole family moved back to Alaska when I graduated from high school. After high school, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I don't give kids a hard time when they don't know what they want to do, because I graduated from high school and barely got out of high school and didn't really didn't care that much about it. The only A I got in high school was in an aerospace class. And I went to listen to what the teacher had to say about the class. And he gets up and says, if you pass the private pilot written, you have an A in my class and you don't have to come back. I passed. My dad said, well, if you pass the private pilot written, I'll pay for your flight instructions as part of your graduation gift.
Nice.
I passed the written in October, and in, I believe it was May, I ended up with my pilot's license. But the rest of my classes I was just skating because I didn't know what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
Right? Then I worked commercial fishing boats up in Alaska. I worked in Prince William Sound before Exxon Valdez. I worked Kodiak Island, but those things taught me that I needed to get a little more education, right? They're dangerous jobs. Alaska's deadliest catch. I already knew I wasn't going to go crab fishing in the Bering Sea.
Yeah.
That just looked like a problem waiting to happen to me. Even
when you were saying that you knew that you wanted to go back and get more education, I think that happens. I think for me, when I was in college, 3 summers I did landscaping, and I can remember telling my coworker, I can't imagine doing this in my 40s or my 50s. I mean, we were in our 20s, right? And it was hard work. But yes, it's things like that keep you going back for schooling and keep you wanting to better your position. So I totally understand that. Even though what you were doing paid pretty well.
It paid pretty well for a teenager, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'd walk away with $4,000 or $5,000 at the end of the summer. It was a couple summers, and I'm glad I did it. I wish I would have documented it better.
Mm-hmm.
With the phone of today, I would have had lots of pictures for everybody to look at, but there's a couple pictures of me sitting on a boat. That's about it.
Yeah.
But the other cool part about that was we actually built, the guy I was working for built a fishing boat from scratch in Seattle. And so I went out and helped him build the boat, and then we took it up the Inside Passage, which all of this predates all the cool tools you have for navigation, right? This was a compass and a radar and a map, and well, I think this is where we are, right?
Yeah.
So then I threw everything I owned in a 74 Toyota Celica and came down and went to DeVry. It's a private school, but because I was paying for it, I got straight A's. I started working in what they call the RF field, RF and microwave. So your wireless router, cell phones, all of that stuff. And back in the 80s, nobody cared about it. It was mostly military business, right? Radars and missiles and that kind of stuff. But in the late 90s, that started changing. And here I am 44 years later, still doing it.
Yeah. We're a similar age. So, I mean, I think people forget, at least younger people, that we didn't have these things. And you were talking about, you would have documented I did some fun things in the 70s and the 80s, and I've got very few pictures, very few. I mean, I kept a journal, but if I didn't have that, I'm not even sure I'd recall a lot of the things I did because it was the 70s and 80s, right?
Right. Yeah, it was a different thing back then.
So you started out in Kalispell, went to Alaska, came back and went to DeVry, you said. Was that in Arizona or where was that?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I was in Phoenix.
Okay.
Private school. They did a lot of advertising. That's how I knew about it. I had a few dollars in my pocket, and I moved to Arizona and ended up renting I found a roommate. There was 4 of us in a 2-bedroom apartment. So it was one of those kind of fun things.
Sure.
So pretty challenging.
Let me back up for just a minute and talk about your growing up again. So Kalispell, did you have siblings?
Yeah. I have 4 surviving siblings. Yeah, there was family of 6 at the time. So it was chaos. We had a Volkswagen bus, and, we had to sound off to make sure everybody's in the car so nobody got left behind. We're counting down here. You know your number. When it comes up, say it so they know you're in the car.
All right, Barry. So I got to ask you, because I grew up with 5 siblings, so there were 6 of us. And were you guys a religious family then? Did you have a religion?
We attended a Catholic church. I'm non-denominational now. I go
Mm-hmm.
to a Bible church. I find it to be much more engaging,
Sure.
right? But I actually went to Catholic school for, I don't know, 3 or 4 years, something like that. So it's Catholic school. I was an altar boy, all of those good things. Yep, that was me.
Yeah, that's the funny thing is I grew up Mormon, which we're not a part of that anymore either. But I would always, get 6 kids. Oh, you must be Catholic or Mormon.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. The big families were more the norm back then.
It was more normal. I mean, I didn't really, even though I grew up in Southern California and there was a handful of Mormons around, not very many. There were still friends of mine that came from big families who were other religions or
Sure.
no religion, something else. But yeah, you're right. Bigger families now, somebody that has 3 kids is considered a pretty good sized family now.
Yeah. And that's what we had was 3 kids.
Did you guys, when you were in high school and stuff, did you play any sports or any musical instruments?
No, I wrestled. Um, and I was okay at it, but my senior year, I broke my arm before I wrestled a single match. My junior year, I got to state and I had a winning, I think I was 12-6 that year or something. I wrestled 119. To put it in perspective, I was the same height I am now, and I was wrestling 119. I'm 165 now.
Yeah.
I look back on that and think, man, that's pretty skinny. But yeah, I broke my arm my senior year right before the first match, and the kind of break it was a 3-month healing process.
So because you wrestled, did you pay or have you paid a lot of attention to like wrestling in the Olympics and things like that?
I didn't. Um, I kind of drifted away from it. Really, I've as far as that sort of stuff goes, I was always more interested in running.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I had to stop a few years ago because of my back, but I've ran, I don't know, 5 or 6 marathons, maybe
Okay.
7.
Yeah,
I actually finished one in 3 hours and just under 50 minutes. So it was about a 9-minute mile,
that's good.
26 miles. If I had to do it over again, I would not have ran all of those marathons because, as you know, your body eventually starts breaking down.
Yeah.
And well, walking 1,400 miles doesn't help either. But
Yeah, we're going to get to that. I'm always curious, what people do in those kind of formative years. You probably didn't see me doing the air quotes there, but
and that's interesting for me because, I think you had asked about mentors and that kind of stuff too.
mm-hmm.
And honestly, um, I really didn't have that. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
have anybody that I said, man, I want to be like them. Now, once I got into the business I'm in now, I really focused on working in jobs with people that could teach me something. And that's the advice I give kids all the time. Whatever you do, try to find a job where they're willing to teach you something,
Sure.
right? Because it's all of this learning that makes you more valuable as an employee.
Absolutely. Yeah. I was just having a conversation with my son probably an hour and a half ago, and he's at a job where sometimes as an employee you feel underappreciated, but because I was in a position for 20 plus years in the corporate world where I was, mid-level management, I had people underneath me. And so I've seen it from both ends is what I'm saying. And so I just told him, I said, you have to give them a reason. You have to show them that you're valuable. And if you want more money, you need to show them why. But just make sure you're doing it the right way. You don't want to go in there and do comparisons or this or that. Just go in there and try to show them through your efforts, hey, you were paying me this and I've come a long way. I feel like I deserve a little more now because I'm more skilled than I was in the beginning. And so, yeah, we just had those same types of conversations though.
For me, you just have to want to learn. As I tell everybody when I hire people, I just want to know if they want to learn. because the company that I went to work for $7 an hour, by the way, which was a lot of money in 81, they basically said, we'll give you the rope to hang yourself. If you want to take on something besides working on the bench here, have at it. And that's what I did, right? Everything that I could lay my hands on, from etching substrates to designing circuits to doing, I just went and did it, tried it out, and kind of landed in sort of this test area. I've been mostly doing test for the last 25 years, maybe something like that.
Yeah. And I think when you're the employee, you want to give your employer the impression, or at least have them see maybe from your work, that, you're there because you want to be, not because you have to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you just have to be looking for things to make you look more valuable.
Exactly.
Right. And those aren't necessarily things that they're going to say, hey, you want to take on this. You have to be the person that says, hey, I want to start doing this. Right. I want to learn this. And most employers, especially my managers, they saw that, hey, he'll take it on. He may not know it now, but he'll know it when he's done.
Well, and then you can teach it to others.
Yeah. And that's kind of where I am in my career. I'm sort of on the downhill slide. So I still do a fair amount of stuff, but I work with people that are about the age of my grandkids.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about your kids and stuff. So we both had 3 kids. I have 2 boys and a girl. So how about you?
I had 2 girls and a boy. So Cassandra was the first in 83, and then Sarah was the second in 85, and then Kevin was in 87.
Okay. Very similar. Yeah, I was 83, 86, and then 96.
Oh, one of those deals. Okay.
Yeah, one of those deals. Well, let's talk a little bit about your kids and about, because at some point we're going to talk about Kevin, but I just like to get a kind of a feel for the family life and some of the things that you guys enjoyed as a family, and, your marriage and things like that.
Yeah. So more detail there. So I actually divorced Kevin's biological mother in 93, which was a pretty traumatic thing for everybody. I ended up with custody of the kids. And so there was a lot of learning there, right? Trying to figure out all of that stuff. But as a parent, I always focused on the kids. One of the things I tell everybody is I never said anything bad about their mother. I refused, even if they said something, I'm not going to go there.
Yeah.
You can discuss that with your mother. I'm not going to get in the middle of that. And I really focused on that and trying to be the best parent I could be. And what happened when they were over there, I did actually get in the middle of some of that stuff. There's kind of some funny stories there. So they were going back and forth, and my oldest, she's in high school. So we had a car that we allowed her to drive, and she was over at her mother's, and you know how they are as teenagers. Sometimes they get pretty yippy with you.
Oh yeah.
And she said something, and I said, be careful, because if you keep it up, I'm going to come over there and take that car away from you. You're not going to have a car to drive. And she said, well, you can't, because I'm over at my mom's. Okay. I got in the car, went over there and picked up the car. And she quickly learned, because I never threatened them with something I wasn't willing to carry out. As a parent, I was very careful about the battles I picked. You know this.
Oh yeah.
Just be careful about the battles you pick. And they knew if I threatened that if you do that again, we're leaving. You do it again, we're leaving. And we'll figure it out later, and they knew that. She threatened, oh, you can't come here and get it. And I said, okay, here I come. And I did. She laughed. We all laugh about it today. It's really cool when your kids get a little older and you become a little smarter again.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
When they're in high school, that guy doesn't know a dang thing. But when you get older, suddenly my one daughter once said that there's a country song that goes, I hear voices. And it's basically about, a younger person talking about how they hear the voices of their parents. And my daughter said, "Yep, I hear your voice every time I'm thinking about something." I'm like, "Okay, what's Dad going to say?"
Well, and once they have their own kids too, because then, all right, now I can see why Dad did what he did, said what he said.
Yeah. Oh,
Yep.
100%.
Starts making a lot more sense. It's important for them to know that if you say something, you're going to do it. And I know that when we were in the car with all my siblings, if my dad said, "Don't make me pull this car over," we knew we knew it was time to straighten up because we knew what was going to happen if he pulled that car over.
Yeah. Yeah. And that, again, it's one of those things where, I see parents that kind of threaten everything and then they don't follow through on it. And kids see through that, right?
Well, they
They
do,
do.
especially if you threaten something that's going to make it harder on you. Like, for example, when you said, "I'll take your car away from you." Now, if you relied on your daughter with that car to run her younger sister and brother around or to do these different things, then all of a sudden you just did something that's going to make it harder on you now. So,
It did.
yeah.
It 100% did. But she knew I meant business. And it wasn't very long before she came around. Let's put
Yeah.
it that way.
Well, and once they learn that lesson too, then they're more apt to fall in line the next time because, well, they remembered.
Yeah. And the other thing I can remember doing with them from about the age of 15, I made them schedule their own doctor's appointments because I wanted them to learn how to call people that you don't know and get something figured out. And they also remember that, where Dad wouldn't even schedule my doctor's appointments. He would tell me to get on the phone and get it scheduled.
And they make it sound like it was a hard thing, but actually, like you say, it was a learning
Yeah.
moment for them too. And it's a skill that probably there's adults that still have a hard time with that, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So give me a sign that we can start over. I run till I meet the sun. And I run till I reach the seas. Won't you go? You know I'll be there. Don't you know you can always count on me? I'll be there. Promise me you come my way. Don't you know you can always count on me? I'll be there.
Okay, well, let's just kind of move into and talk a little bit about some of the things that you're doing now, and probably some of the things that you're doing now, we both know, are tied to your son Kevin. So let's talk about that a little bit.
So yeah, my 18-year-old son Kevin died of alcohol poisoning on the day he moved out. He had just graduated from high school. He wanted to move out. And right before that, he wanted to buy a new truck because he was driving an 81 Ford that was pretty beat up. I agreed to co-sign a loan. I made him give me 3 months worth of insurance payments and car payments. And I'm hoping he'll find a truck from a private party, go down to the credit union, sign papers, and be out there in 5 minutes. He found one at a dealership, which means I got to go into the dealership and sign papers. For those in your audience that work at a dealership, I apologize, but I have a healthy dislike for that process. Because I know they're going to sell me a bunch of stuff I don't want or need, right?
Or try to.
And or try to anyway. And I go in and sit down. The first thing that guy said to me is, "How about some life insurance?" I'm like, "Look, dude, I don't need any life insurance. My wife will do just fine if something happens to me." And he said, "I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about your son." I'm that guy. I'm that guy who rather indignantly told him that 18-year-old boys don't need life insurance because they don't die. But I was wrong. They do die. He wouldn't live long enough to make a single payment on that truck.
Yeah. And I watched that in your video, and I thought about that. And yeah, I mean, before we started the podcast today, we were both talking a little bit about losing a son. And, it's just like you say, a lot of times it's something that people don't talk about because it's a hard thing. It really is. But you're talking about it, but you're also helping educate people and helping young people to understand that, actions have consequences.
Yeah. And I'll be honest with you. I was very angry with God when this happened. I simply didn't understand why he would let this happen to my son and not take me instead, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's young, I'm older, I was in my 40s at the time. I didn't understand that. And I, in rather colorful language, told him that. I was just furious about it. A couple days after that, I was laying in bed. And this is a little difficult for me to describe, but I'm going to do my best to describe it. I was laying in bed when it was one of those things where I sort of felt like someone came in the room. Like when you didn't see him and you turn around and somebody walked in real quietly. And then there was a light that I'd never seen before and haven't seen since. And there was a message. And the message was that Kevin didn't suffer and something very good would come from this. And before I knew it, it was gone. There was no conversation, wait, and I'm not here to tell you it made everything okay, because it didn't. But it gave me a phrase that I still use to this day. And really, I tell everybody the most you can hope for when you lose a child is to make something very good come from it. That's really all you can do. There is no money in the world that'll fix the hurt. You know that.
Right.
The most you can do is try to make something good come from it. And a lot of parents have. I'm not terribly unusual in that area. I guess it's what I did with that. And I struggle with what that is, right? What is something very good? Is that, I mean, I wrote a letter to the editor and, did those kinds of things. I did a few interviews on TV and newspaper and that kind of stuff. And I thought, well, maybe this is it. But then we got into the part where we talked about what are we going to do with his ashes, right? And I remember standing in the kitchen. A friend of mine, or Kevin's friends, said, "Why don't you take his ashes to Montana? We're in Gilbert, Arizona." Oh, yeah, it's a good idea, because he had been there a number of times and always talked about wanting to move there someday and buy a ranch. So we decided to take him to Montana. I was standing in the kitchen sometime after that, and it just occurred to me, I'm going to put him in my backpack and walk there. And the idea from it, obviously, I believe this was God breathed, but in my mind, there's an old movie called Lonesome Dove. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
Yes, I have.
That's where the idea came from. And I won't give it up. If somebody hasn't seen the movie, it's a great movie. It's a Western, but it's a different kind of Western.
Yeah, it's a good one.
But that's where the idea in my mind, I came up with this idea. Was it terrifying? Yeah, it sure was. Well, how do I go about doing that? I was originally going to walk the Continental Divide, but then as it evolved, I thought about, I want to tell the story along the way. And if you're walking the Continental Divide, you're going to be telling it to squirrels and elk and bear and that kind of stuff. So we decided to walk on the roads. I look back on it, Larry, and I am having a hard time believing I'm the one that did that. Because it's 18 years in the rearview mirror now.
Yeah, and that's a long walk. I mean, is it 1,300 miles or something?
It's about, we always say 1,400, but it's probably about 1,360. I had to avoid freeways. So, because I called like Utah, I called the highway patrol there and they said, well, we might kick you off the freeway if you walk on the freeway. So I had to take the back roads. So it was a little further to avoid all of that. But I averaged about 90 miles a week. I told the story probably 30 or 40 times. Churches, treatment facilities, schools. And back then I started telling the story probably way before I should have, because I really wasn't ready. I mean, I had it all typed out and I read it for quite a while. I would just read it. But I had some good advice. I actually partnered with Not My Kid. It's an organization here in town. They set up all the speaking engagements. They funded it. I had to get time off from work. My employer actually gave me 4 months off.
That was nice. That was good. And you know what? I think that they understood, I'm sure, the difficulty of losing a child.
Yeah. Yeah. And you kind of I asked people, I talked to a lot of people. I had well-meaning people try to talk me out of it, relatives. And I don't blame them for that, because I think they were afraid I was going to fail, which I get it. I wondered about that too. But I talked to a guy who had ridden his bike most of the way across the country. I can't remember exactly what he did, but he did a longer distance thing. And he said something to me I've never will forget. He said, well, how do you think you'd feel about it in 10 years if you don't do it?
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of sealed the deal for me. One way or the other, I'm going to make this happen.
Well, the message, that you received in your room a couple of days after Kevin passed, something good was going to come out of that. That was part of the message, as I recall. And, this trip, I mean, 90 miles a week, you're looking at what, 3-4 months, I guess.
Yeah, about 4 months worth of walking. This is the interesting thing. I didn't have a single sick day or weather day, because we had to schedule this all out so that they could set up schools and stuff. And so I had to just take a guess and say, okay, I'm going to average spending miles. So this is the day I'm going to be in this town. This is the day I'm going to be in that town. And we lived out of suitcases for 4 months. We lived in hotels. We did not sleep under bridges. My wife, Bev, and I, she was the road manager. She managed all that stuff. But again, this predates the cool tools that you have today, because we had to just look at a map and go, yeah, I think it's going to take about an hour to get to that school. I better stop right here and head over there.
Yeah. All those schools, those kids that you talk to, I mean, yeah, that's the big message right there, is that you're able to, you're able to talk to them about a young person that is either their age or maybe just a little older than they are at the time they're hearing this message, and hopefully get them to, well, actually, I know this because I read some comments from that you sent to me, and I can remember a couple of the kids saying those things like, I'm not going to drink until I'm 21. And I can't remember. I just read a few of them and I was thinking, see, that's the positive message that's coming through as you're telling Kevin's story. Kids are hearing that and they're like, wow, and it affects them.
It does. And as the story evolves, as I learn how to tell a story, Larry, a couple things that were important. First one was that one of the people at Not My Kid, when she said, okay, do your practice, read it to me. That's fine. But she kind of coached me and said, I realize that you want to talk about all these other people and all these other things and, all that kind of stuff. And she said, but I want to know the details. I want to be sitting in the room when you get that knock on the door. I want to be walking into the funeral home with you when you pick up those ashes. I want the details. And as that evolved, it got clear. Another thing that I tell the kids, and I tell everybody this, it's the same thing I tell everybody. I'm not here to tell you how to live your life. I'm just here to tell you a story. Maybe you should think about what you want your story to be.
Yeah.
Right. Because and it actually was a guy, I'm pretty sure he meant it as an insult, but that came from a guy who asked me, he said, do you still speak at schools? And I said, yeah, I do. And he goes, you're too old. You shouldn't be doing that anymore. You're too old to be talking to them. You're 2 generations apart from them. And at the time, I was kind of offended by that. But I thought about it later, and I'm like, that's probably something I should address right up front. And so I do. And I've had principals say that's the most important thing you said, because it just kind of, not here to tell you how to live your life. Just relax. I'm just here to tell you a story.
Yeah, it's a great approach. And it's not just that it's a story, though. It's a story that changed your life. And I think that's what people don't understand. I mean, when you lose a child, I mean, for me, my son was 31 and he had just gotten married and he had his whole, kind of life ahead of him there. And so what you really mourn is the life that could have been for Kevin and for Dusty in our case. So yeah, I mean, that's the thing. The life that they didn't get to live.
The life they didn't get to live. And for me, as far as grief goes, this is the difficult part, is that I wanted to feel the way I did before he passed away on July 9th. That's the way I wanted to feel. And for years, that was kind of my mindset. And after a while, I realized that isn't possible, because he's gone. The old you dies with your child. The new you is there. The new you can be a better person, but the old you is as gone as your child is. And that sounds harsh, and I don't mean it to be harsh, but you're never going to feel that way again. You know that. You're never going to feel that way again.
And the other thing that took a little while for me to kind of come to grips with is when it first happens, everybody rallies around you, and rightfully so, their lives have to move on. And then all of a sudden it's just, you're left there. And that was hard for my wife and I. And my wife and I had just sold our house in Gilbert. It's interesting. We're both from Gilbert, but we had just sold our home, hadn't even moved yet when my son passed. And so within weeks, we're in a new state. We don't know anybody in a new city and by ourselves. And just weeks before our son had been alive. And it was just a crazy time. And so my wife and I just turned to each other and, we got through it and we're getting through it still. It's funny. It's been, over 7 years or whatever now. But like you say, that life, what we were before, that's gone. And so now we have this new life and we're moving forward but yeah, I enjoyed the video and if you can, and I'll put it in the show notes, but maybe tell people about that video a little bit. The one that I watched, I think it was about 9.5 minutes or 10 minutes long.
So that was created by some guys at Not My Kid. There was a lot of discussion about the length of that video. It's actually been viewed a fair amount for me. Between the two of them, I think it's been viewed 10,000 times, which is a lot.
Yeah.
But the way that worked is they had a series of questions that I did not know ahead of time, which is the way I kind of like to work it. We went and shot that up in Sholo. And a couple funny things that happened there. I like to talk about the humorous things that happened. So at the beginning, you hear me say, "My name is Barry Adkins, and I'm not the right guy to be here." That was the fourth time the guy asking the questions asked me that question, because he did not like my answers. And apparently I figured that out after a while, like, okay, I'm not giving you the right answer, right?
Yeah.
And then I read the letter from Kevin, and I was supposed to write that out ahead of time, and he told me to do that, but I blew it off. And so while we were shooting part of it, my wife Bev is in a cabin right next to that place, writing that out so that we could do that scene where but yeah, it was a well done documentary. I've had people ask me if they're going to make a movie about this, and my answer is the same. That's way over my head. If somebody wants to make a movie about it someday,
yeah,
that's fine.
I really liked that letter though. So I thought that was really cool to kind of hear it from, you know what I mean? From Kevin's perspective.
From Kevin's perspective. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that was all part of, I wrote a book about this, and writing a book for me was harder than walking to Montana. Have you written any books?
It's funny you asked that, but yeah, I wrote a book right before Dusty passed. And then a year later, after he passed, because now it's print on demand, I went in and wrote 2 more chapters. And one of them is on losing a child. And I think it was very therapeutic for me, Barry, to be honest with you, to do that.
It is. So the way it ended up happening for me, I'd kept a blog. That was about all you could do back then. There was no FaceTime Live or Facebook Live or any of that stuff. I kept a blog. And when I got done, I reached out to a good buddy of mine that had been helpful. And I said, "Hey, I'm going to print out this blog. Do you want a copy of it?" And he said, "No." I'm like, "Oh, well, why not?" He said, "Because you're going to write a book about this. I don't want no 3-ring binder with your blog in it. You need to write a book." And I said, "No, I'm not," because I was a little averse to major projects at that point. But a year or two later, I did it. Stephen King wrote a book on writing. I read a lot of things about, 90 Minutes in Heaven. And there was a kid in Nebraska that went there and came back. And I read a lot of those kind of biographies and memoirs. But Stephen King kind of helped me because I'm an engineer by trade. So that creative part of my brain isn't really there. But he said that when he writes, he would go into a room, close the door, put on whatever music you want or no music. But he said, you just write. It's a stream of consciousness. Whatever you're thinking about, just write it down. Don't worry about if it's ever going to fit or where it would go or anything like that. Use that creative part of your brain, but don't go out of it. And that was very helpful for me because later on, then you use the logical part of your brain to say, okay, I don't think that's going to make the cut, right? I don't know where I would put that. I don't know where I'd put this, and try to do it in that manner. because it really did help me, because the logical part of your brain, and it's hard to write a book like this because you have to remember that the audience doesn't know any of you, right? So you got to be careful who you introduce and why you might introduce them. Could I have spent a lot more time on all the family and the kids? Yes, but I tended to stay away from it because then I got to introduce them. There's got to be a reason why I introduced them. Because you give your book to I don't know if you did this, but I gave the copy of the manuscript to some relatives and said, read it. And every one of them said, yeah, that's really good. I love it. And I know, they're just being nice.
Sure. Yeah.
Right. And I'm like, yeah, but that's not what I want to hear. I want to hear something you didn't like. And so I actually got a book club to read it. And I went back to talk to them, and they go around the room and, okay, tell me something you liked about the book. And there was good stuff. But then I said, okay, now we're going to do a different thing. I want you to tell me one thing, at least one thing, that you did not like about the book. And that's where you get the criticism that you need. Mm-hmm. Right. I don't remember all of the criticisms. I took most of them and fixed it. But one of the ladies said, you told me more about your shoe selection than you did about how you felt when you finished the walk.
Shoes were important.
Well, shoes are important. That's exactly right. But, it was that kind of stuff. And would I rewrite it today? Yeah. Could there be a second edition someday? Oh, I don't know. It would be another major project. And with all the speaking stuff I do now and podcasts, I don't know if I'm going to have the bandwidth for that.
And we're at a different place in our lives too. I mean, because your story goes on. I mean, if I would have interviewed you 10 years ago, your story would be a little different than it is today. And, And so, when I look at my book, I would definitely have a different take on certain chapters, because mine was a memoir, but really only about the first 60 pages. Then from there on, it was just my take on different things until I then, right. Like I said, later, I wrote a book on losing a child and different things. But like my take on religion is different now than it was then. And some of that because of the loss of my son. But again, we're always evolving. We're always changing. We're always growing. Hopefully we're always learning. So we're going to be different.
And it very much changed my relationship with Jesus and with God. I realized that I'm not in control as much as men like to think they're in control of everything. And that sometimes God has plans that you're not going to like, but this is what we're doing. And he wants you to grow from that. He wants you to grow from that. That's one of my takeaways, is about adversity. Bad stuff happens to everybody. The Bible tells us that. The way you respond to adversity is going to define your life.
100%.
So it didn't say might, it will.
Yep. Pain
is fertile ground for radical change. Don't waste that pain.
I totally agree with everything you just said right there. I mean, it's how you respond to the adversity that comes your way, because it's going to come.
It's going to come. You'd like to put your kids in a bubble and not let anything bad ever happen to them. But these things happen in life. And I've learned that it really it changes your perspective. Everybody talks about how I'm kind of calm when we go into big customer meetings and that kind of stuff. But I always tell them, I guarantee you this isn't going to be the worst thing that ever happened in my life, even if this is an epic failure. Right? You just know, well, it's not that big a deal.
Yeah. And I think the other thing, my takeaway too, is as we get older, I think we become more authentic in the lives that we live, and we're not so concerned maybe with what others think about certain things, maybe what we wear, how my hair's cut, whatever. We're much more concerned about that in our younger years. And it's kind of a nice place to be right now.
It is, because you know who you are, right?
Yep.
I mean, I went on a podcast. It was something about being authentic. And he asked me, what does it mean to be authentic? And I said, well, before you can do anything, you have to know who you are. It's impossible to be authentic until you know who you are. When I do the presentations, I tell everybody, if you're going to do something like this, don't get up there and try to talk in a way that's not natural for you. Because if you get up there and try to use words and things, kids especially see right through that. I just tell them I'm here to tell you a story, like I said, and I just tell the story. I don't try to be someone that I'm not when I'm up there.
I appreciate you taking the time and talking with me today and telling your story. And I'm going to put the link to that video in the podcast in the show notes. Is there, you said you wrote a book. Do you want to mention your book?
So the book is Kevin's Last Walk, A Father's Final Journey with His Son. That is on Amazon. And I still do the speaking stuff. I'm willing to travel to do that. You saw the feedback. Bring me to your school. We'll make it happen. For me, I think you're probably in the same boat. I have to pay for travel costs, but I'm not a speaker that's going to charge you a $5,000 speaking fee or anything. It's whatever the travel costs are. And let's see, in the last year, I've been Illinois, Wisconsin, Nebraska, all over Arizona, but I'll go there. I like going and telling the story. I just did it at a school in Illinois. I got a video of that, and they had 900 kids in a gym, which is pretty intimidating because this is 900 teenagers in a gym. But you could hear a pin drop when I started talking, and I believe it's either a God effect or a grandfather effect. I think. Oh, it's my grandfather talking. I better pay attention.
Well, like you said, you got a message to share, and you're sharing it. So,
yeah,
and I just know it's impacting these young kids, and they're going to think about things. And I know that maybe there's only one person. I'm confident there's more, but even if there is one person that benefits from your message, then it's worth it.
Yeah, we've gotten a lot of feedback. There was. I spoke at a school up in Scottsdale, and a couple weeks later, I got an email from someone there. There had been a party. Someone at that party was passed out. One of the students that heard my story wanted to call 911, but the other students didn't want him to. This student that had heard the story took the kid that was passed out, put him in his car, and drove him to an urgent care facility, who had him air evac'd out and saved his life.
And there you go. There's the impact in real time. Yeah. Well, right on, Barry. Well, hey, man, appreciate it. It's fun getting to visit and talk and get to know another guy that I can tell his kindred spirit, and we definitely have a lot in common. Losing the sons is, as I said earlier, it's not a club you want to be a part of, but once you are, I think we understand each other in a way that maybe others can't, and I do appreciate you sharing
you're
your
not
story.
alone. Yeah, you bet. Thanks for having me on, Larry.
Okay, everyone. Well, hey, check back. We're going to have another interesting guest. It could be 2 weeks from now. It might be 3 weeks from now. Might be tomorrow. Anyway, check back. That's the important thing. Hear these stories because they are impactful.
Down a little old country road not far away. Let's talk story. It's where my mama was born, it's where I come from, it's where my daddy fell in love not long ago.
Let's talk story. Let's talk story. Let's talk story. Talking story.
Sit down and relax, stay a little while. It's been so long since I've seen your smile. Well, a little of this and a